Hello, my name is Carl Surrey and this is a video tutorial for the Facebook group called Fans of Serif Software. Now in this video I want to look at altering an image using the develop persona, which is this icon up here, rather than the one it opens at by default, which is the photo persona. You can quite easily edit and can probably do it slightly better using various layers and what have you in the photo persona, but there are some ready-made tools within the develop persona which are quite handy to use, especially for a beginner. I think the develop persona is really meant for processing raw files, because when you open a raw file in Affinity Photo, it will automatically open up in the develop persona, but non-raw files like JPEGs and TIFFs do not open up in that persona to start with. Now this is sort of a step up or a variation on what Serif did in Photo Plus. And I did make a video for this. In fact, it was almost exactly a year ago in February 2016. And I'll just quickly do a quick recap on this. This is a raw file that was opened up in Photo Plus, and apart from all the presets down the side here, there are various tools and alterations that you can make from one place in this raw studio. If I just cancel this, now this image is a JPEG, and there is a button up here called Photo Fix, and if I click on that, this Photo Fix studio, it has the same sort of presets down the side and the same tools all in one place on the right. So you could alter raw files from the raw studio, or you could alter non-raw files from the Photo Fix studio. So I'll just cancel that. In fact, I can close this down, I don't need that anymore. So coming to this, back to Affinity Photo, I'm going to use the develop persona on this JPEG file that I've opened up, and the image comes from pixabay.com, which is a royalty-free website, and I'm going to alter it to give it this sort of vintage look with these scratches on it, although personally I don't like the scratches, but that is just there for demonstration purposes to show you that what you can do if you want to. And it is pretty much all done using the developer persona rather than using various layers in the photo persona. So I'll go back to this very bright and obviously more modern image, and it's currently in the photo persona, so I will click on the develop persona, and then over here on the right hand side we have various tools and various tabs with more tools that you can use. Now obviously I'm going to go for what I've sort of practiced for and written down notes for, which is a vintage look, but you can alter this or your image in any way you want and to get the result that you want. I just want to demonstrate that you can use this sort of like one-stop area where you can get all sorts of tools without having to open up different adjustment layers and what have you, because it is all done within one sort of area. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Tones tab, and I'm going to put a tick in black and white, and this will open up the tools for the black and white, and then I'm going to, you can alter the sliders to alter how the colours, the original colours that are in the image, are affected within the black and white range. So obviously there's not much colour in this picture to start with, but I'm going to, as I've got some numbers preset, I'm going to type these in. The green, blue and cyan have no real effect on this image because there aren't any in the image, so I'm going to come straight down to the magenta and I'm going to make that 63, and the yellow I'm going to make -517. As you can see now, this is a much more detailed and shaded image. And so the next thing I want to go for, it's still within the tones tab, it is the split toning, and from here you can sort of change the highlights and the shadows, and you can have like a different colour for the highlights and a different colour for the shadows and different saturations. So again, I have got some preset figures that I have written down, and I'm going to go for 27.5 for the highlight hue, and the saturation I'm going to go for 2.4. For the shadows hue I'm going to go for 4.6, and the shadow saturation I'm going to go for 43. So there's just like a slight hint of the red coming back into certain areas of this, and for the balance I'm just going to make this 8. Now obviously if you're going to go for a vintage look like I am, you may not want the same settings, and it may not suit, these settings may not suit the image that you're working on, but this is just to show you how there are sort of all the tools you need to make many alterations, but all in one place. So now I've finished with the tones tab, I'm going to come back to the basics tab and going to make some alterations to these ones. Again, I'm going to put in some numbers I've already worked out, so I'm going to go for -0.651, and for the black point I'm going to go for 11, and brightness I'm going to go for 14. Then on to contrast, this one was 32. Clarity was 18, just to bring up some of the sharpness in the image. As there's no real colour in this, I don't have to use saturation or vibrance. So next thing I'm going to come for is the details tab, and there is noise reduction and what have you, but I'm going to add noise. Now the intensity of this, I've got this set at 26, but I found that once I click on the develop button, the amount of noise that I can see on the screen now, it seems to not give me that much noise when it develops. I'm not sure why that is happening, but I will still put this on 26, and hopefully you can see there's a lot of noise graininess in this image. and then hopefully when I click on develop you will see that it sort of loses a lot of that graininess. So there are other tabs which I'm not going to use at this moment, which is like lens, where you can distort an image, like alter the horizon and the rotation, but I'm not going to use any of these at this moment. I will be using the post-crop vignette a bit later, but I just want to show that there's a lot of these, especially the horizon one, because if you have got a sloping horizon you can alter it using this tool here. Right, so the next one we're going to come to is overlays. Now the overlay is, there's like two types. You can have a brush or a gradient, and what this will do is it will add a sort of, not that you can see it, but it's like an invisible layer above your image, and then you can use the brush or gradient tool on top of this image and then go back to some of these other settings, make alterations, and it will only affect that particular layer. So I'm going to add a brush overlay, so that this is now the layer that we're working on, not the master, and this is where I'm going to sort of add the scratches, which like I said before, I don't particularly like, but it does show you how this works. So I'm going to make the hardness of this brush down to 10%, and I'm going to make the size also 10 pixels, and then I'm just going to draw some lines on here. I'm not going to go too meg. Hopefully you can see that that's in sort of a red colour, and I'm just going to put one or two down that side there. So like I said, this is like a layer above the copy of the image below. So if I come back to the basic tab and make any alterations, it is only affecting these scratch or whatever you've added to the image. So I'm going to with the exposure and brightness and what have you, if I move this exposure to the left, the scratches will sort of go black, and if I move them to the right they will go white. So I'm going to come down to roughly minus 1.2 to make the scratches black. The brightness, you can sort of make them a bit darker or lose them altogether and just bring them back slowly, so they're just like faint scratches, which was what I'm going to do because I don't particularly like the scratches on the image in the first place. So if I go back to the overlays and then click on the master, we'll now be working back on the main image, or the overall image really, and this is where I'm going to add the vignette, and where is it? It's on the lens, that's it, and the post-crop vignette. Now I personally find that the vignette can be quite subtle, and I find it easier just to push the hardness right up to 100%, and then if I move the intensity all the way to the right, hopefully you can see this now, this white vignette here, and if I move the scale I can bring that vignette right the way in or right the way out, and if I move the intensity to the right, left I mean, you have this black vignette, and because the hardness is quite hard, it is not so subtle, but I prefer to do it this way so I can position the vignette where I want it and just alter the intensity and scale, and then drop the hardness just so that sort of the bright area is subtle from the middle moving outwards, and you can still tinker with the intensity and scale a little bit. So I'm quite happy with that at the moment. So I will come back to the Basics tab, and I'm going to come down to the white balance, and the temperature I'm going to set on 45, and the tint I'm going to put on just 1, and I will then just tinker a little bit with the brightness and the exposure just to make this a little bit lighter again. So hopefully you can see that using the developer persona, you have got the ability to keep making alterations without having to sort of keep making layers. This really is not quite where I was hoping to end up, because it's not really like that. So I'm just going to make a few minor alterations, and I will leave that there. So now when I click develop, it will take all these alterations we've made and lay them down onto back to Affinity Photo, and hopefully you can see there that all that noise that I added seems to have disappeared. So I am just going to make a couple of minor alterations back in the photo area. I'm going to use recolor, and I'm going to make the hue 11.8 and the saturation 11. Just sort of give it that slightly tinted black and white look, and then I want to come to add a filter to this, and filter noise, add noise. Now I found with this that when I click apply, it doesn't seem to bring back all of the noise that you see in the preview. So I'm just going to bump this up quite a bit, and then click apply, and hopefully that is a little bit nearer to, I think I preferred the first version I did when I did this as a test run, but hopefully this does show to you that using the developer persona on a non-raw file, you can make vast amounts of different alterations without having to keep making layers and adjustments, because the only extra adjustment that this has been added is the recolor one, and then so you've got a much smaller list of layers, because I've only got 2, because the first one was done in the developer persona where all alterations are made in one hit. So hopefully that makes sense. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.